And friends, we've gathered here with our little candles and lighted them in memory of a great person who not only lived amongst us, but inspired us, led us, fought for a better life for all Ghanaians, and fought for the ideals of social justice. Just as these little candle lights flicker, even as the wind blows, and they refuse to go off, the flame refuses to go off, so will the flame he lit in Ghana never be extinguished. The great men who come along once in a lifetime, and we say that they will never die. It was said of Nkrumah that he would never die. His opponents mistook it to mean that he was being deified like Jesus Christ. But all it meant was that his memory would live on and he will never die. It is the same with JJ Rawlings. His memory would live on and it will never die. You'll always come across his memory. Recently, I went to the Afram Plains, and at a deba of chiefs and people, one of the chiefs, slightly elderly man, said that we were here and nobody knew that we existed, and that it was Flight Lieutenant JJ Rawlings who came and discovered us. And it is he who has made us who we are. Everything we have today, our roads, our hospital, the electricity, the water, it is his vision that brought all that to us. I thought that that was a very powerful testament. Many years after he left office, this chief was speaking very powerfully about what he had done for them. I'll just say a few anecdotes of some of my personal experiences with him before I read my official statement. We wrote to him. I was president, and cabinet had decided that the FPSOs that we use on our oil fields should be named after ex-presidents. And so the first one was named after Kwame Nkrumah, FPSO Kwame Nkrumah and the Jubilee Field. The next one was named posthumously after President John Evans Atta Mills. And then there was the third one for the Sankofa Field. And the manufacturers were pressing us for a name, E&I. And so I got them to write a letter to him. And you know those presidential letters. In line with Cabinet's decision to name FPSOs after ex-presidents, I am directed by His Excellency the President to inform you that it has been decided to name the FPSO for the E&I Sankofa Field after you. Very imposing letter. And he wrote back to us, and he says he declined for the FPSO to be named after him. He says you can name it after any of our chiefs, our great chiefs, and he gave examples of those chiefs: Bewa, Jakba, Prempe, and several others. And he said those famous words that I prefer to be remembered in the hearts of men than by monuments and statues. That was the man. And so, of course, the next FPSO, if you remember, was named after former President J.A. Kufuor. But that's one of the experiences with him. There was another time, we attended a funeral together at the forecourt of the State House. And I was sitting next to him. And so when I sat down, I started exchanging pleasantries. And for those of us who have worked with him for quite a while, we know how to look out for his mood. There are sometimes he wants to be left alone. And there are sometimes he's in a good mood and he wants to chat. And so when you sit down, just recognize which of the moods he is in that day and just respect it. If he's not in the mood to talk, just keep quiet and sit. And so that's what we did. That day he was not in the mood to talk. I exchanged a few pleasantries and I realized he was not forthcoming. And so we just sat together quietly and watched what happened. And then later, a newspaper or a radio station interviewed me and said, you know, but why were you sitting with Jerry and you guys were not chatting? And I said, you need to gauge his mood because it depends on which mood he has. And so if he's not in the mood to talk, you know, don't bother him with any long talk. There's another joke we shared at Hogbechocho. We were sitting together and the Agbaja was taking place seriously. And all the back, you know, moves and all that. And then I cracked the joke. I told him, I said, boss, I called him boss. You see why you Ewe men don't get backache? Because of the vigorous Agbaja and the back exercises you do. He laughed and didn't say anything. And then that occasion you saw was when he was being given a doctorate at the University of Development Studies. And while we were at that function, there was a cultural troupe from the north that was doing the Bamaya dance. And for those of you who know the Bamaya, it involves a lot of waist shaking. I thought he had forgotten about this, and he said, Chief, you see why you Northerners don't have waist pains? You see how they are shaking their waist? You know, I mean, that's the kind of person we have lost. One of my recent experiences was in the choice of our running mate. I had to consult all the leaders and elders of the party. I had done quite a lot of consultation, and we had fixed the date, a Monday, to take a final decision. And so I asked to see him on Saturday. And so I went and saw him that Saturday, and I read out the names of those who had been shortlisted without saying what my own preference was. And there were 5 names. So he asked me, he said, have you finished all the consultations? I said, well, there are just a few more. I have to see Alhaji Mahama Idrisu and a few more of the Council of Elders. He said, okay, why don't you finish with them and then come back and let's, you know, discuss, and then you can make the final choice. So let's meet tomorrow. Tomorrow is Sunday. When do you say the event is? I said it's on Monday. He said, okay, but I'll be in Tefle. I said, oh, no problem. I'll drive out there. And then we can sit by the water and drink some coffee. So he agreed. And I left. I finished the consultations. The next morning, I was getting ready to drive to Tefle. And then he called me and said, Chief, I decided to spare you the journey. Don't waste your time driving all the way to Tefle. Look on your phone. I've sent you a text. And he went off the line. So I checked my phone. And he said, you didn't tell me your choice. But I knew that your choice was Professor Nana Jane Opoku Ajiman. He said, and you know his favorite, he said, she's a woman of integrity, and I think that you should go with her. That was the text. And so that sealed my decision. And everything else is history. But when the time comes, there are a lot of moments we shared with him that will be useful for us to put on paper in books for those of us who worked with him, so that future generations will know and understand the person that we are mourning today. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and our brothers and sisters around the world, and those joining us on TV via the internet. I thank you for joining us tonight as we pay homage to a most remarkable individual, a father, a husband, a soldier, a leader, a revolutionary, our comrade, president, a statesman, and my boss, Flight Lieutenant JJ Rawlings, the first president of our Fourth Republic. News of his death hit us like a thunderbolt. It is the kind of news that everyone can remember exactly what time, where you were, or even what you were doing at the time you heard the news. I was just arriving in Obuasi area to begin the third day of our campaign tour of the Ashanti region when the news was broken to me via a phone call. It was too shocking to be true. I made a few more calls to some close relatives to verify if the information I had was true. And alas, our worst fears were confirmed. The last time I met him at his mother's funeral, and subsequently had a telephone conversation with him after the funeral, he sounded hale and hearty and didn't appear like anybody who was going anywhere anytime soon. I later learned he had been hospitalized when I was leaving for the Ashanti region. A quick call to one of his aides reassured me that he was taking a rest and being observed by the doctors after the stress and fatigue of his mother's funeral. Flight Lieutenant JJ Rawlings has been an enigma all his life, and no wonder his manner of departure from this world had to be sudden and totally unexpected. Like any leader, there were those who loved him and would lay down their lives for him. There are also, unfortunately, those who disliked him with a passion. And this is already reflecting in his life's postscripts being written by many authors. Since his passing, I've seen several postscripts eulogizing him, and I've seen a few others in anguish that he passed away so peacefully. This marks the end of an era, but it's also the beginning of an era. The persona of Rawlings bestrides Ghana like a colossus. His impact on the current trajectory of our country has been immense, and it's necessary for us to find the right balance to appraise his role as the founder of Ghana's current democracy. His life was tumultuous. His life was filled with tragedy and triumphs. Death is the ultimate leveler, and we must use this occasion of his passing to bring healing to our nation. He was our comrade, and we worked with him. I called him boss, and he called me chief. He was not perfect. Neither are we perfect. We had our disagreements, and we had our joyous moments of success. Having led this country for 19 years, longer than any past leader has and ever will, his impact on where our country has come from and where it is headed cannot be understated. Let us make his death bring us together. As the longest-serving head of state of our country, he was the leader of the revolution. He was a royal of Anglo. He was the husband of our former First Lady, Her Excellency Nana Konadu Agyeman Rawlings. He was the father of Zaneto and her siblings. And also importantly, he was the founder of the National Democratic Congress, the NDC, and he was also a former president. So all these interests own the man, and these interests must come together to give him a simple but befitting farewell. What happens with our mortal remains are ephemeral. As was said by Shakespeare in the book Julius Caesar, the evil that men do lives after them, the good is often interred with their bones. For the cadres of the revolution and the members of the NDC, we must work and fight to ensure that his good is not interred with his bones, and that his positive impact on the history of this nation is preserved for posterity, and that the principles that he stood for are recounted to future generations yet unborn. Thanks to the organizers of this vigil, and may all who knew and appreciated him continue to celebrate his life. Knowing him and having worked with him, we all recognize his distaste for flamboyance, pomp, and pageantry. Let our party, therefore, NDC, the government, his family, and the Anglo state work together to celebrate his life and use his passing as an occasion for healing this nation and bringing us together again as one people with one nation and one destiny. These flaming candles we hold in our hands are symbolic of the good fight he fought. He struggled for us to remain together. His was a life well lived. Boss, your death is not an end, but a mark of new beginnings. Indeed, as you said, and I quote, "We owe a sacred duty to Ghana to serve her people and help to achieve our legitimate aspirations. The worst crime is to abuse the trust reposed in us and thus destroy the hope of our people that the sacrifices we make will yield a better future for all of us." Quotations closed. Walk on. Stay well, brave soldier, senior comrade. Walk on. We're grateful for your life. We thank God for giving you to Ghana. May you rest in perfect peace, and may the flame you lit in Ghana continue to burn forever and ever.